All right, Raf Diallo here from RT Sport and delighted to be joined by former Connacht rugby player Tadhg Leader, who is behind Leader Kicking, which aims to bring through potential Irish kickers and punters, and also delighted to be joined by Ross Bolger, Gaelic footballer from Laois, who's looking to be part of that crop of budding talents heading stateside. So, lads, welcome along and nice to chat to you. Plenty to go through today, obviously, between the kicking, punting, and the route towards the US. But I suppose, Tadhg, maybe to start with yourself all the way back to the beginning, in terms of your interest in NFL and American football, is that something that stemmed from childhood at all, or did you have any exposure at all when you were growing up?
Besides playing Madden and watching some of the movies, no, it was never. Kicking was always on my radar because playing Gaelic football, soccer, rugby in Ireland. The kicking element was always my radar, but the sport, not particularly, to be honest. Only in the last couple of years that I was probably one of those Irish people that made the comment that it's awful boring, it's awful slow. Until I got into it and began to appreciate what the sport is. But obviously for us, it's the kicking element that most people don't get too excited on fourth down when someone comes out to kick the ball away. But that's what we live for in the kind of kicking and punting world.
Yeah, and Ross, similarly for yourself, was there any interest as you were growing up, or is it sort of a kind of more recent interest that you've developed?
Yeah, no, I actually for years I would have watched it, just kind of starting off flicking around the channels on Sky, and then I found myself just watching it every Sunday for years. I think I started watching it in 2015, and then from then I actually was engrossed with it. I used to watch the NFL every Sunday, and then after a few years of that, I got interested in college football and used to watch the odd game of that as well. Not as much, but on Saturdays as well.
Yeah, and for yourself, Ross, I suppose obviously you've played inter-county with Laois up to, is it under 20 level, and then you've also got a background in rugby too, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I played rugby with Carlo for years as well, up till about minor. That's when I made the choice to stick with the Gaelic football. But the rugby really helped me out as well because I would have been a place kicker with and played out half with Carlo. So the transition over really helped me there as well.
Yeah, and Tadhg, for yourself, as I said at the top, like you played rugby with Connacht, came through there, and then went across the US. Can you just give me a bit of background in terms of that journey there towards Lindenwood University, and then how that growing exposure to American football actually began for you?
Yeah. So yeah, I ended up going to Lindenwood University. It's in Missouri. It's a random enough spot, but it was kind of coming off the back of a shoulder reconstruction and quite a few ankle injuries. So actually, after I left Connacht, I signed in Italy for a little bit, but that lasted around 6-8 weeks, just because the shoulder was goosed. So I was kind of done with sports, so I just wanted to go over and have the crack, study, just more of a normal student lifestyle, and then over in the US, that's when it was. So I was there. Major League Rugby, it's like the pro league there now. That came along, so kind of was hesitant about getting back into the sport just because I kind of was so engulfed in it for so many years here through the Connacht system. But then I got a call to play for San Diego, and I thought, you know what, I can do that in the sunshine of San Diego. So I got back into rugby, did a few years of that, and then started playing with the US national team. Along came COVID, and then that's what was. Whilst I was in the US, everyone talked about obviously kicking. I'm not a great rugby player, but I'm a pretty decent kicker. So people are always like, you should try American football. Never did take it seriously because I was on a kind of pretty good career path as the game was growing in the US, and I was kind of growing with it, and my enjoyment was growing with it as well within the sport. But COVID pressed pause and everything, and that kind of led me down a pathway chasing that sport. Initially I tried to go through college, but I wasn't allowed to play in college because of my rugby background. So that then led me trying to jump in some of the pro leagues in US and Canada and Europe. Great time, and then that just it was really obvious Irish lads should be doing this because we were born to kick, but we just kick balls, and we're natural at it. Ross is the testament to that. So that led me down the route of leader kicking in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and it was a training, wasn't it, Tyke, that somebody had brought in American football, and then you're kind of like, I'll give this a go.
Yeah, it was real, just like organic. Just honestly, just again, just Irish. We go for a kickabout with the mates. We have the bit of crack, just kicking the ball around. So that was it. Honestly, I just started kicking it, and then I started kind of backing up. And I was on a running track. There's always a running track around. It was in the US. There was always running tracks around the high school. And by the end of the session, people that were just going for a stroll or a walk were kind of coming over and watching me kick. And they were like, "Hey, who do you play for?" And asking me questions. Because at the time, it was Nick Folk, or not Nick Folk, is kicker for the Patriots. I think it was like week 1 of the NFL season, and he'd missed like 2 or 3 kicks in the first game, and so he was under pressure. And then everyone's like, "Oh, you should, try and do this." And I thought it was, I thought they didn't have a clue of what the actual level, what good looked like. So I went home, started YouTubing videos of NFL kickers, of top level college kickers, to see how my numbers compared. And then when I noticed, like, I'm actually not, I'm kicking 55, 57 off, day one, that was decent. And then I got onto a kicking coach, his name's Brendan Cattle, and he's actually one of the key kind of ingredients in leader kicking today. He's based in the US, but yeah, it was just a organic enough bit of crack, and then it's steamrolled into something bigger.
Yeah, in terms of the ball as well, Tadhg, like I've had this conversation with Christian Wade a couple of years ago, the former Wasp rugby player. Obviously, he was trying to do the transition as well from rugby to American football, except obviously more as a running back. And his thing was with the handling of the ball, and he was talking about the difference in handling one over the other. In terms of your adjustment, then when you're kicking in American football those first few times, how much of an adjustment is there as a kicker or a punter?
From the kicking world, obviously a Nova ball, but the size of the American football is smaller, meaning or sweet spot is smaller, and also the ball is not on a tee, so you don't have that kind of margin for error with your foot. So if you're off by an inch or two, your foot's contact on the ground in American football, which then obviously changes the angle of your foot, which changes the outcome of the kick. In rugby, we don't have that issue because obviously it's sitting up pretty. Plus, you place it on a tee, and you have 60 seconds. So I think initially there was some similarities to make quick progress, but when you actually got into the seriousness of it, and it's a different ball game, especially then when you add on the snap, the hold, the kick, the pads, the helmet, the rush. People think it looks easy, but once you get into it, you realize there's a lot more to it. But lads like Ross make it look easy, thankfully.
Yeah, Ross, similarly for yourself in terms of the adjustment, like you're used to, I suppose, the rounder ball, the Gaelic football, but also, I guess, the rugby ball as well. Did it come naturally to you when you first went to kick in American football?
Yeah, it kind of did. Like the first session went well. That's why I stayed going. Like I was going just to see would I be any use, and then obviously I stayed going. But just the thing that's the most different, obviously, from the Gaelic football and rugby is the fact that it's a live play, that there's a snap and a hold. There's different variables to it, which makes it harder, but it's more challenging, which is what I like. And then, like Tadhg said, the smaller ball means the smaller the sweet spot. So that creates a bit of a challenge as well. But yeah, I'd say it did come naturally enough to me, anyway.
Yeah, and Tadhg, for yourself, in terms of actually using the skill then in a more competitive environment. So if we go down to, am I right? You spent a little bit of time in Poland with Panthers, Wrocław, and then a little bit of time playing Canadian football as well, which obviously is a slightly different sport, but more or less in the same ballpark. How instructive was it for you in terms of how, you do that adaptation first and then you apply it to a real life competitive situation?
Yeah, it's tough. So for me, it was the first, say, 3 months. I moved up to San Diego and trained there with most of the NFL specialists, and specialists meaning kicking, punters, snappers. They train together in the off season, and they do it in San Diego. So I just joined them in that training environment, and it's great, and it gives you an idea of what to expect. But then, obviously, when you get dropped into a game scenario, it's the same. You tell yourself it's the same, and obviously your kicking technique is the same. As Ross said, though, there's just a lot more kind of variables go on. So that's really important. Say height, for example. When we're kicking in training, we don't have lads rushing us and trying to block our kick at 7 yards. We're aware of our height, and we're aware that you can tell pretty quickly whether have been blocked or not within reason. But we don't always have the referral of actually a body there in front of you to give you that referral of it's blocked. So getting into a game, you kind of quickly realize there's a lot more going on, and you also realize you have the appreciation for the big lads up in front of you who actually, it looks like on TV, it just looks like a mess, bit of a scrum or a ruck and lads hitting each other, but it's unreal the amount of detail that they have to then give you 1.3 seconds to give you 7 yards to get it up, 12 or so feet quickly. It's wasn't simple, but obviously if you have the kicking talent and kicking ability, that makes it a whole lot easier, I would say.
Yeah, and then you've set up leader kicking, and that's to try and bring through this wave of Irish players. Obviously, as you said, there's a sort of inbuilt ability based on the sports that we play in this country that lends itself to Irish players. We'll get a bit more into that a little bit later on, but sort of what inspired the idea then to start leader kicking, and where you saw that there is a route here?
First day in San Diego training, first day kicking with these lads, with all the NFL lads and the coaches, and I remember kind of leaving the session, and John Ryan, he won Super Bowls with Seattle Seahawks. He was a punter there, and he was kicking in front of me. We were in a line, just next lad steps up, punts the ball. And I remember kind of having no training, but I wasn't as good at them by any means, but like was able to be in that session and not look out of place. I remember kind of going away and thinking, wow, it would have been unreal if I could maybe discover this kicking and punting world earlier. And then that kind of put it in my head, like, well, maybe it's something you could do and bring home whenever you're done on your journey within the sport. So literally from first 5 minutes in the first session, it crossed my mind that we can make a big influence. We have the ability to impact the sport. And then as I went through my journey and worked with all these different coaches, I was recording everything, taking note of all the coaching advice, because it was always in the back of my head that I was going to bring it back to Ireland, whether it was in 6 months, 2 years as it was, or 10 years. When I knew I wanted to bring it back to Ireland and try and open up the pathway for American football kickers. Plus, I was aware I could help rugby kickers as well, because there's so much detail that doesn't exist in the rugby world, because they don't go into it that much detail. So really early, and then I was just trying to record everything, have a catalog of information, so then I can then spit all that back towards the Irish lads.
Yeah, and Ross, obviously you're working closely with Tadhg at the moment in terms of honing your kicking and then trying to get onto the US college system. How did you kind of come in contact with Tadhg in the first place, and how did you find out about leader kicking?
It was just through Instagram, really. I was just scrolling. I think it was around August, September time. It was the day the Aer Lingus College Classic, actually. I'd been somewhere in America, and I was coming home and I saw that Tadhg was promoting the kicking at halftime. And I was like, oh, I wish I was at home for that, to give it a try, like, because it's something that always crossed my mind when I was watching the games every Sunday. Like, I'd love to give that a go. And then once that finished up, Tadhg just, I gave him a follow, and Tadhg just put it up that he's going to start sessions now every week. And I literally just signed up and went from there. Since then, I've been going every week.
Yeah, it's the good side of social media, I guess. we always hear about the bad side, but there are obviously benefits as well. You've been over in the US now, I think is it earlier this month, just doing trials at the US colleges. One of them, I think, Pace University. Have you gone to any others, and how have you found those trials so far?
Yeah, no, there hasn't been any others, but I've been in contact with different coaches in different universities through Twitter, and the trial went very well. It was a great experience. Even if I don't end up there, it was something that definitely benefit me in the long run. It was just really, really interesting to see the campus and the pitch and all. Like, it's obviously different kicking here in the GA pitch or just down in the local park or something. It was great to go out, see the yellow goalposts and get a better idea of the pitch as regards 10-yard line and the left and right hashes and stuff like that. It was really beneficial.
Yeah, what kind of I suppose drills did they put you through in terms of putting you through your paces?
Yeah, so first I went into the head coach and I had a meeting with him for about an hour. We were just kind of talking, getting to know each other, and started off with the academic side of things and what I wanted to achieve there. And then we went outside, and I just started kicking field goals then for him. I kicked, I think, 10 or 11 field goals. And then we moved on to kickoffs, and then finished up with a bit of punting as well then.
Yeah, and Tadhg, I suppose from as you said earlier, I suppose there's the Irish angle in terms of there is that natural pathway for ourselves. Australians also kind of play vaguely similar sports as well in terms of also if you add in the Australian rules, and there is a I suppose a tradition of Australian kickers and punters heading that way through the US college system, similar to ourselves. It looks like from a US perspective, those two countries, ourselves and Australia, would be sort of the low hanging fruit for them.
Yeah, in fairness, what the Australians have done has been phenomenal. They sent over 110, to my knowledge, lads across on scholarships as punters. I think over like 99% of their lads are punters. But yeah, they've done a phenomenal job, and they're at the top table. You know, the last day that whatever a few weeks ago, the college final, you know, both punters are Australian for the top two teams in the country. They flood Division One punting. So I guess they've proven, you know, that foreigners. I think initially some of the American coaches can be a little bit traditional or de facto from a non-traditional American football country, aka not America. Bit skeptical maybe, but obviously the kicking and punting is a really obvious route. You know, they just see us Europeans as soccer players, really. That's kind of what I used to get all the time. I must be, you know, you guys play soccer. So it's the awareness and willingness to seriously look at us now, even though we don't have high school tape, is there. I guess the curiosity is there, and obviously, you know, from Ross went over that to kick that day at Pace University. It's not very common you do say a trial like that. It just worked out well that we're geographically so close that he was able to get over his family in the area, that he was able to kick for that coach. And you know, as a result, Ross mentioned there to Twitter, we've had a lot of like big D1 programs kind of see that footage, and now they're like, oh, okay, you guys are kind of on the radar now. Whereas in Ireland, I guess there was never a pathway, so there was no. I was really aware of that there was no program or pathway for lads to do it here. So now, thankfully, you know, coaches are aware of us. The talent exists, and now we're just trying to, I guess, formalize it, and hopefully Ross will be our first lad across. But yeah, as you said, low hanging fruit. It makes sense, and the good thing is we're good kickers as well, not just punters, because I think just a lot of rugby lads are like free takers or goalkeepers, and like a lot of intercounty Gaelic goalkeepers have been reaching out to me, because now they're used to striking it a long distance off the ground as well.
Yeah, and there are a couple of Irish involved, like that I've spoken to in the past, that are both in both of their cases, they're actually punters. David Shannon, I think, is quite well known. His story is kind of well known from a couple of years ago, from who's now at Georgia Tech, and then very coincidentally, he ended up playing in the same match against Ben Kiernan, who had gone over more for family reasons to North Carolina, and he's also going through the college system. So you have a Kerry man and a Dub playing not playing each other in an All Ireland final, which is usually the way, but actually playing in a big college football game. Ross, would you have been aware of either of those two stories in terms of, like, I suppose, inspirations in terms of that there are other Irish people who have gone down that route and are actually slowly making progress?
Yeah, I remember when the news broke about David, I kind of started doing a bit of research about Australia then, because it was obviously something that would have interested me then as well. And then I saw the amount of Australians that were going out, but I definitely considered it, but I didn't. I think once my college life started here in Ireland, I kind of put that to the back of my head then, and kind of I was enjoying college here and just playing football here. And then once I heard about Tadhg starting his kicking, then that kind of reintroduced it and freshened it to my mind, really.
Yeah, and speaking of Ben Kiernan earlier, so he would have been at Blackrock when it came to secondary school before he went off to high school in the US with his family. And coincidentally, Tadhg, so you held an event at Blackrock. So how did that go? And I know you brought a load of industry experts over as well, and there was quite a lot of interest from people involved in rugby, GAA, and also professional soccer too.
Yeah, no, that was brilliant back in November. So basically, at that point, I'd seen lads like Ross, and there's a few other guys that I was watching. I was like, these guys are very, very good. Like, you know, these guys are scholarship worthy. You know, coaches are going to want to look at them. But then I was like, I might have been a bit biased just because I desperately want this to work for them. I want this to work and open this pathway. So some of the coaches, Brendan and Ken, came over from the US just to get their eyes on it. And thankfully, Brendan left. Brendan's the main kicking coach, and when he left, he was like, there's something here. It's like there's clearly something here." And these were guys, raw lads that had never. Some of them had never kicked a ball. Ross, he would have been the most experienced, who's probably kicked it maybe for a month or two at that stage. Most of the lads were raw. Again, we have some really good, as you said, high level soccer players, inter-county Gaelic footballers, and kind of fringe academy Irish underage kind of rugby players. And the talent is just it's just obvious. Like, it doesn't take a genius to see that. But again, it's not just about kicking the ball through. It's about kicking it through 9 times out of 10, getting really good elevation on the ball, or in punting, your hang times, your accuracy, your spirals, whatever it may be. But I guess that was just a really important day to confirm what we're doing is going the right direction, and we have the people on the island, and then having the endorsement or the lads in the US advocating for us has been huge. And that's kind of opened up a lot more opportunities, like Ross getting to go to Pace. That was obviously through those connections that we developed that day. So yeah, big success, and I'm hoping to do more of those events so I can get just come, have a go, explore it, no expectation, and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, as you said, you can see the raw material. Like, stylistically, when you look at somebody taking a kick for the first time, before they, I suppose, they hone it and they work on it like Ross has been doing, are there obvious things that jump out to you straight away when you look at their technique and you kind of go, yes, that's there's something we can work on here?
Yeah, there is. Again, like, for example, a lot of kind of rugby and Gaelic football lads, they would take more steps. So it's 2.5 steps really, or 2 steps is what you have in American football to take a kick. That's 2.5 is your max. Whereas all those lads were probably coming up with 4 or 5, or they're chopping their feet doing an extra 5 steps, but they actually don't really go anywhere. But it's almost like getting momentum, I guess. So you see things like that. But when it comes to the raw bit of just actually foot to ball contact, is the biggest indicator. Yeah, you can tell pretty quickly that guys I remember Ross. I seen this red-haired fella with some blondie tips turning up back in Sport Ireland in August. I remember seeing him kick and thinking like, oh wow, we're just kicking into a net. I don't know if you remember this, Ross. We're just kicking into a net around 10 yards away, but I could just see his ball contact and his flow. So his flow through the kick, like his plant foot and his kicking leg, how he extended. I was like, wow, that's it. Like, that's literally what the Americans coach and kids desperately try and get to, and he was just doing it. So yeah, you can tell. In fairness to you, Ross, you're probably the quickest, most obvious one. I guess that's why we're sitting here a few months down the line.
It's good that I got rid of the blonde then as well.
The one other thing that kind of stood out, just looking at clips of Ross Tadhg, is the ability to be ambidextrous, essentially, to be able to kick brilliantly off both feet. And I'll ask Ross in a second which one is actually his natural foot, because I actually didn't know. I don't know the answer to that. It'd be interesting to find out. But why is that so important? It would seem obvious in some ways, but why is it so important, Tadhg?
I think the biggest thing is that would just apply when it comes to punting. Maybe kickoff. If you do like some sort of onside kick where you're trying to regather possession, it's good to use both feet, just because the opposition know what's going to happen. But primarily in punting, it just means the returner, so the fella in the backfield is trying to catch your punt. They're reading body language a lot, and they're reading your eyes, and they're reading your tendencies more often than not. I've talked to Cavante Turpin. He's in the NFL Pro Bowler now. He plays for the Dallas Cowboys, and Cavante played with me in the European League a year and a half ago. I remember chatting to him because I was trying to figure out, how can I mess you up? He's the returner, so it's like, how can I make his life as awkward as possible for me being the punter? And my left foot is nowhere near as good as Ross's, but I remember kind of like playing around with that, and he was just like, yeah, he goes like, that's going to mess me up, because what I'm anticipating, you just throw a total new random thing at me. It's hard for them to judge and know what's going to happen. So it just makes it really awkward for the returner to cover the backfield, almost like a fullback in rugby. So if you can sell one thing and then do another, it's just a really impressive kind of trick to have up your sleeve. And fortunately, Ross is fairly cultured at that, I guess, thanks to his Gaelic football days.
Yeah, and Ross, so I'd be interested in getting the answer from you there now. So which one is the dominant foot, and then how did you actually build up the other one in terms of getting it to the same level?
Yeah, so I'm naturally right-footed, but from a very young age, I don't know, I was kind of I'd say it was maybe under 10s, under 12s Gaelic football. I started practicing away at the left foot, and I wanted to get it up as good as the right. And just it's probably a few of my underage coaches were pulling their hair out with me. I had a few howlers off the left, but as the years went on, it actually got as stronger and stronger. And then come the last few years, I've been like as comfortable taking frees off the left as my right. And then when I was over at Pace, Brendan just said to me, or the head coach said to me, would you be able to kick off your left? And I was like, yeah, I never even thought of that really. And Brendan was giving out to me after saying, how have you never mentioned this? But it just came natural out of the hand to kick it off the left. It was just similar to kicking a Gaelic football really, which I had been so used to.
Yeah, because I did see those clips. So the kicking coach you're referring to, obviously Brendan Cowell.
Yeah.
What have you worked on since in recent times with him in terms of, I suppose, honing your kicking or your punting for that US college system?
We've just been working on kind of rolling out either side now. That's seen as I'm able to kick off to left and right. We've been working on rolling out, taking a few steps out of the pocket either side. If it's right, just take a few steps right and punt right, and then the same with the left. Obviously, it just means that the opposing team might have to put two returners back there, which means they have a less man up front, which means they don't have a good chance to block the ball. So it really gives you a lot of options there.
Yeah, and Tadhg, I suppose the other thing as well, I mean, we've been talking more about kind of kicking technique, punting technique, but Ross's ability to also tackle is something maybe that's a little bit underrated as well.
Yeah, so what I found out when I first started playing was, coming from rugby, all the coaches and the lads were like, oh, you must love tackling. Like, this is brilliant. And I remember kind of saying, oh, yeah, sure. But I was a soft fly half in rugby, so I didn't love tackling. But it's a huge, thankfully, Ross is a strong fella, and he's able to throw a shoulder. So it is a huge value. It just means on kickoff or punt, when we're putting distance on the ball, that he's able to get downfield. And typically kickers are not regarded as athletes. At least that's changed a little bit. But in the US, the kicker's kind of a subsection off to the side. Just wait till you're told to kick it, and then go sit down again almost. Thankfully, it's better, but it's a huge string, and the lads, the players, your teammates. This is what I experienced. Your teammates and the coaches really respect you from the athleticism side of things if you can go in and mix it with them when needs be. So, yeah, a huge bonus to have a lad that can kick, that can punt, that can kick off, and then obviously can throw a shoulder in when needs be as well. So, yeah, it's massive value add.
Yeah, the other side, of course, is the off the pitch in terms of the education and trying to navigate that entryway into the US college system, which obviously, if you're doing sport, it'll be through the scholarship system. Through leader kicking, I guess that's an important factor for yourself to, I guess, be that sort of bridge where you can help players or prospective punters and kickers, navigate that system, because it does seem a little bit complicated from this side. Obviously, we're just used to applying for our universities here, but the US system is a bit more, obviously it being foreign makes it a bit more tricky to navigate.
It's just even knowing it, it's still complicated. Like, yeah, it's mad how the layers around it, but yeah, like that's critical. And I guess it's obviously we're just chatting kicking and the athletic side of it, but the academic side of it, if you don't have the academics, you can't access the athletics. So that's the reality of it. So it's a massive component of what we do, and ensuring that, like, even we're chatting to some coaches for us at the moment, and trying to figure out, like, what are your master's programs, what do you have, how does that fit into Ross and his lifestyle, what he wants to maybe do after he's finished. And Ross is in the education world, so you're trying to find, it's not just about finding the best program who gives the biggest scholarship. It's about finding, academically what's a really good fit. And then even for certain people, they could have family in the US, so then where are they located? Do you want to be near them? So there's loads of different components to manage. We don't just want to teach the lads how to kick and then find them a scholarship to kick and then send them off without, they need to be heavily involved in the process. And the academic side of it is huge. And then obviously the rewards of that are great. Something that's really cool is that after you go to the US, whether it's an undergrad or master's, when you graduate, you get an extra year to live there and work on an OPT visa. So you can actually, the workforce there is so big, the options are so big. So lads can then, experience that side of it as well. It'd be great if everyone went to the NFL, but that's not realistic. So you need a degree, and you need to go, leverage. If you play college football, your network is massive. Just because I guess but maybe some of the listeners don't. But just the business of college football is colossal. So the network and the opportunities is really big for life after sport. So that's a key component when we chat to parents, is about, that's just as important. As I say, if you don't have the academic side of things, we can't do anything with you unless you're going to go straight to the NFL, and the odds of that are not high.
Yeah, are there specific universities or colleges that you've sort of linked up with or have had conversations with in terms of the ones you feel are best suited to players coming from Ireland, and in terms of helping them adapt best?
There's so many colleges, and there's so many ones that have different offerings, and geographically quite different. So I guess it's more so from the perspective of, we ask the player, do you have a preference? And then from there, we can try and utilize that. So Ross has a brother who lives in New York. Obviously, when he went over recently, he was kicking in New York, Connecticut kind of area. So if you can marry it up that way, yes. But it's more so dictated by what they want, they being the athlete. And then from there, between Brendan and I, and Brendan's fantastic, that he just has he's very, very respected, and deservedly so. So he has a massive network then. So once we know what a lad wants to study, we can then attack it that way. Or if they have a geographic location, then that can also help in terms, I guess it limits options, but then it allows us to hone in on what it is they want. So that's usually how the process works on that end.
Yeah, it's a huge country anyway, so you land wherever anyway. But Ross, I suppose in terms of your own time frame, so because obviously the academic year, it's sort of from the autumn all the way to the summer, and obviously if we're following the sort of NFL college football season, it's sort of in and around the winter months as well. So what's your time frame now? Obviously you've gone on a few trials, and I presume you're still at DCU. So in terms of getting to that step of potentially maybe even next year, or sorry, later this year, trying to get onto the college system, like how quickly are you looking to do that, and I suppose what's the hurdles?
Yeah, so the plan is I did a 3-year course in DCU. Well, I haven't finished yet, but I hope to graduate then in April. And then from there, the plan would be to get out as soon as possible. So if everything goes well, I'd be looking to start over in America come August. I think they'd have training camp in August, and then into the academic year of September. So it would nearly be straight into it, just a few months off for the summer and straight into it. But me and Tadhg knew that from the start. That's why there's kind of a lot of emphasis to push this on and try get over there as soon as possible.
Yeah, the recruiting cycle starts really, they plan. They do so we're actually kind of coming out a little bit late, just for the fall. So for August 23, most Americans, a lot of programs already we've got messages where yeah, lad, you're that Ross lad looks class, and no, unfortunately we've already got a kicker on scholarship. So we kind of came a little bit. We did come late to the party, but obviously 4 months ago this didn't exist. None of this existed. So we're playing catch up a little bit, but thankfully that's why hopefully moving forward as well, and for the next crop of lads coming through, the earlier we could start, the earlier they start, whether it's 5th or 6th year. Then the earlier we can start compiling tape, and then reaching out to coaches a year in advance versus a couple of months in advance. But thankfully Ross is so talented that it's been open doors regardless of the time frame.
Yeah, and something you said before we hit record, in terms of the social media. I mean, I've seen a few of Ross's clips, and obviously it's been getting a great reaction. But you told me at the top before we started that that's huge, and maybe something maybe we wouldn't realize, but social media is huge in terms of the recruitment, for rather even more so maybe than even game tape or anything like that.
Yeah, it's mad. It's at first I thought it was a little bit awkward to be kind of so active on social media and hey, look what we're doing kind of thing. I think it's just an Irishness maybe a little bit. But I found out, hey, just get on with it, because in America it's social media, specifically Twitter. Mainly Twitter, and then Instagram is where all the recruiting takes place. It literally is just lads just put up a video, saying, look, this is me banging over 50 or 60 yard field goals. And then coaches just follow, they send you DMs, and it goes from there. And yeah, so that's why the support from the Irish people has been class, because, the more they've kind of supported, obviously the more eyeballs it gets, the more reach it gets, the more opportunities. And one of the videos of Ross, we remember he pointed left and then he pointed right. maybe 10, 12 college coaches probably reached out via DMs to Ross, and then probably got a lot more followers from special teams coordinators. So that's, and even on Instagram, I got some messages from special teams coordinators. So like that is the recruiting tool. So we kind of have to shout loud via social media because that's where they're listening. So again, thank you to everyone that's been supportive on that. But it's absolutely critical. But like that's where everything happens. So we have to be quite active there. And I had to convince Ross himself, like I had to be convinced around like it's different, but we just have to, just get on there and say what we need to say and show what we need to show, because that's where it all happens.
Yeah, that's where all the eyes are. And of course, at the moment, before I let you go, of course, a lot of eyes are on the NFL at the moment with because they're coming down to the championship games, and then Super Bowl will be next month. Between that, the interest, and there is plenty here. There's plenty of people in Ireland who follow the NFL. And then also, as you said, the social media growth from clips of Ross's kicks and, other footage as well. Have you seen a sort of almost the start of a little bonanza in terms of people taking interest in what you're doing with leader kicking and trying to maybe contacting you to try and get on board and maybe grow this thing?
Massively. Over, I think like 157 people have a sign up form. It's pretty detailed. People have to sit down and take like 10 minutes to fill out. Over 150 people have done so. And then, just like the amount of then like just again social media, like DMs and people reaching out. There's huge interest, like huge curiosity, because like most of us, loads of lads are saying, hey, I play for Kerry Miners or Dublin Miners and I take the frees, or I'm well able to kick a 45 or rugby, whatever it may be. And I'd love to try this. Like, this looks class. I'd love to give it a go. So the interest has been, there's a really strong Irish American football community. Not that big, but I would say it feels quite strong just from the support I received as a player, and now I'm seeing with Ross, but now also through Ross, it's class to see we're getting a huge Gaelic football and rugby and maybe non-American football fans that are starting to engage and be curious with it all. So it seems it's alive and well, and obviously on the back of all these things we're doing, it's only going to grow. It's only going to grow and continue to grow. So, and just like, thank you for giving us a bit of exposure and spreading the word, because I'm hoping, more Gaelic footballers, rugby players, soccer players, lads that can kick, that, might have watched on TV and thought, oh, that looks interesting, but then stopped there. Or like Ross, he thought about exploring it, but then he stopped because there was no avenue. Now that there's an avenue and a pathway, hopefully more and more, people will come give it a go, explore it. And if they're good enough, there's a pathway. And if they're not, well, at least you tried, at least go try things, I guess is kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and Ross, I suppose there's that thing as well. I guess we saw it with the rowers, with their success in the Olympics. We saw it maybe in a way also with Katie Taylor back in 2012, and what that does to a sport or a subset of a sport. So for yourself, even if you were to make that dream happen and get to the NFL or get to quite a high level, is there almost a sort of thing you're looking for, that kind of reflective thing that it bounces back to people here, and then almost people, as often happens in a lot of countries, when they see somebody make it, a lot of other people sort of follow on?
Yeah, well, like even without even making it to a college yet, I've seen that the community on social media and Twitter and everything, and I'm getting texts left, right, and centre saying, "Oh, best of luck, like go for it," and this and that. And even in person, I could bump into people and states that I mightn't have talked to before, and they'd come up to me and say, "Saw what you're doing, like very best of luck with it and all." So this support's been immense, and I just want to say thanks to everyone, because it's been unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think all I can add as well is also best of luck to yourself with that. We'll be following closely as always. When people from Ireland are trying to do something, we obviously follow it really closely and kind of wish everyone the best. So Ross, best of luck with yourself, and also Tadhg, best of luck with leader kicking, and hopefully we do see a wave of Irish kickers and punters heading stateside and maybe even making it to the NFL.
Sound man, Ralph. Thank you very much. And yeah,